All right, I got a fun one for you today. A couple of days ago, during Judge Barrett's confirmation hearings in the Senate, Senator Cory Booker proposed a scenario where President Trump pardoned himself on the way out of the office so that if Joe Biden wins or later on down the line we discover he really did collude with Russia or some other crime, could he pardon himself to make sure that we could never follow up on anything he ever did in office? If he did that, Judge Barrett, would you say that's constitutional? And of course, Judge Barrett answered the way she always did, in that I will not give you any hint as how I'm going to rule. That's a Supreme Court issue. Ask the Supreme Court, in a nutshell. So let's just look at that. Could a president pardon himself? Well, the answer seems to be straightforward. But then when I read some legal journals, I don't believe it is. Let's take a look at it. In Article 2 of the Constitution, we see, quote, "The President shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment." And impeachment in there does not necessarily mean himself. That word is left wide open for interpretation. A lot of people believe that he can't stop any impeachments whatsoever, because a crime done by a government official against the people is the most heinous of all crimes in a constitutional republic. Supreme Court has interpreted this language to include the power to grant pardons, to grant conditional pardons. If you testify, I will pardon. Commutations of sentences. He can stop your sentence. He can conditionally stop your sentence and cut it short. Remissions of fines and forfeitures, respites. The president can say, hey, you know what? This dude's old. He needs a chance to do this or that first. Let's hold off on that until, and can prolong it before you serve your sentence. Or just blanket amnesties, forgive whole groups of people, such as draft dodgers, or in the case of Bill Clinton, forgive whole domestic terrorist organizations. Pardon, however, the president's power to pardon is not restricted to any temporal constraints, except that the crime must have already been committed. So if the crime has been committed, but we don't know who did it yet, we can go ahead and forgive everyone and just call off the investigation. And this is what Cory Booker was alluding to, or at least is what I would like to think he's alluding to. If a crime has already been committed, can I go ahead and pardon myself now before you discover that I actually did it? This gets really interesting in here, because according to some lawyers, receiving a pardon is an admission of guilt. Otherwise, why would you need a pardon? But then according to other lawyers, it's not necessarily an admission of guilt. It's just a, let's not waste our time doing this kind of thing. So let's go to Supreme Court precedent. United States versus Wilson, 1833. Mr. Wilson is accused of convicting a U.S. male in Pennsylvania and was sentenced to death by hanging. Due to his friend's influence, they talked to President Andrew Jackson, and Andrew Jackson issued a pardon for Mr. Wilson. Well, Mr. Wilson wouldn't take the pardon because he said the pardon is an admission of guilt. I didn't do it. I would rather die with my honor than to admit this guilt and the shame against my country. So he refused it. It went to the Supreme Court. Do we have to kill this guy? He's got a pardon. And the Supreme Court actually said, if he doesn't receive the pardon, then you can't force him to take the pardon. And Mr. Wilson was hanged. As part of that, Supreme Court ruled that the pardon would have been seen as an admission of guilt. So to receive a pardon is to say that I am guilty. All right, let's carry this process out. If you have done an admission of guilt, you've waived your right to the Fifth Amendment, your right to remain silent. So to receive a pardon means you cannot stay silent about it if called upon to testify, according to the Supreme Court. Let's do another case in here. Let's go to U.S. versus Burdick. There was a publisher. There was a leak within the U.S. Treasury Department, and a newspaper publisher was producing that leak. He was arrested and fined heavily and sentenced to prison for perjury, or for contempt of court for not answering questions. So President Wilson offered the guy a pardon and said, look, we'll let you out of jail. But then that would be an admission of guilt, and you would have to waive your Fifth Amendment right. So he rejected the pardon and remained in prison so he would not have to reveal his sources. So these pardons can go both ways. Is it an admission of guilt? Well, the Supreme Court says it would be. One thing a pardon is, though, is that your federal rights would be restored. You get your voting right back. You get your right to own a gun back. You get your right to run for public office back. but only on the federal level. If the president issues this pardon, the state can still rescind these freedoms within the state. On the federal level, you're forgiven, but the state can block you from running for office, voting in that state, or whatever, at the state that the crime was committed. The legal and constitutional ability of a president to pardon himself thus is an unresolved issue. Unlike what Cory Booker said, we have seen this before. We have seen this multiple times before. It became a big, huge debate during, obviously, the Nixon era. Good President Nixon pardoned himself. And his legal team said, yes, the president can pardon himself because it was very vague in there. He's not being impeached. Thus, he can pardon himself. But then the Justice Department said, no, he can't pardon himself because if you keep reading in the Constitution, his job is to faithfully execute the laws. And you can't faithfully execute the laws at the same time you're breaking the laws. Fortunately, and unfortunately at the same time, this never made it to the Supreme Court. So we still have not resolved the issue. This came up again during Bill Clinton's impeachment. And we debated this stuff back and forth 20 years ago. A lot of people don't remember that, but we did. We don't know how the Supreme Court would rule in a case like this, but we do know that the president, under the 25th Amendment, could say the pressure is so much that he needs to step down or take a step aside for a little while. The vice president could become acting president, and then the vice president could pardon the president, stopping everything because he's got the official pardoning power of the president. Then the president can retake his seat once it's over based on the 25th Amendment. So there is a loophole in here where the president doesn't have to pardon himself and can never be persecuted or not prosecuted or pursued after that. Isn't that a fun one to think about? So can President Trump pardon himself? I guess, yeah. Would it be accepted? Probably not. It would be a big, huge fiasco. Who knows? I will leave you with this. As Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes remarked, quote, "When the ignorant are taught to doubt, they do not know what they safely may believe." The more doubt we can put in your head about these people and about their character and about what your Constitution does, the less you're going to actually believe about your own system of government. All right, guys. Hope you had a good time with that, and we'll catch you later.